welcome back to the Strangers Worth Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Hixson. Strange one today, folks, because I believe this is going to be the ultimate episode of the Strangers Worth Meeting podcast. And by ultimate, I do mean last. I feel like people don't say that anymore. But I wanted to, put a bow on this podcast, and I've got some things to fill my listeners here in on. I have been blown away over the time span of this project that people have really cared to listen and check this podcast out. I really appreciate all of you, and so I felt like instead of leaving this podcast to die, like so many podcasts do, I wanted to actually give it an ending, some closure emotionally for me. I promised I wouldn't cry, but no. Well, the podcast itself has been an amazing project, and I wanted to give you some updates, tell you what's next, and tell you what my focus is going to be on now, because I will still be doing lots of podcasting, but it will be happening in other places, and there's a good reason for that. So the Strangers Worth Meeting podcast, I actually went back and just listened to the first intro I made, this little 2-minute thing talking about all my goals for the podcast. And you know what's so funny is that actually I think the podcast did exactly that. We set out on the road, Andrea and I, several years ago now, I think almost 4 years ago. And after 4 years of full-time travel, we have decided to settle down for a bit. I mean, at least for a bit. In Bastrop, Texas, which is just outside of Austin. So we're part of the Austin crowd, which is pretty cool. So I wanted to, I think that news has already sort of been dropped. It's not really a hot item anymore, but this podcast deserved to have an ending. So the point of the podcast was, hey, I'm traveling all over the country. I'm going to meet all these people and, be able to, be able to tell some stories, be able to talk about the things I wanted to talk about with people I wanted to talk to, and have an excuse for that. And that's exactly what this podcast did. So let's see, this will be, episode maybe 89, something like that. So, I've really met a lot of people on this podcast, a few repeat guests, but let's think about this. All right, so you're ending a podcast. That was all about travel. So what comes next? Well, the big thing is now the Wild Hixsons podcast. So Andrea and I, simultaneously started the Wild Hixsons brand at Wild Hixsons everywhere. We started a podcast of our own where we're telling our stories over there. And we are doing so much in Bastrop that is going to be based there. I don't really have the need for the Strangers Worth Meeting podcast as well. I'm still meeting lots of strangers just in the town I'm moving to, but it's not quite the same, is it, as a show that's on the road? So, maybe if I live on the road again, I'll pick this back up. In fact, that could be kind of cool. Give it a decade. That'd be strange. Will podcasts be around still by then? I mean, maybe the AIs will just be writing it. Anyway, these were the things we kind of did on the show. It just turned into a lot of strange musings with me and technology. And of course, you were there for all of it. So thank you for being there. So here's what I think is going to happen is the podcast itself, I think the feed will go away on the normal podcast apps. So my plan is actually to put all the episodes up on YouTube where they can live forever. The first 30-ish episodes of the show, I wasn't even doing video with the podcast. So I'll get those up on the channel and they'll just be, audio, and people can go and check them out. But that's where this will be now, in case you ever wanted to go find it, you'll still be able to find the amazing episodes with my awesome guests. This podcast was an incredible excuse to meet people. It's tough to literally always be a stranger in every town we lived in for the last 4 years. We knew, generally only our clients who we were working with, or we knew the places we wanted to go see. We didn't actually know anybody. And I met incredible people on this podcast. I met a friend who now works at Marketing Tea. I met amazing people in jiu-jitsu. I met people outside of jiu-jitsu too. There was actually some of that too, believe it or not. We met amazing hunters. I met a family member, if y'all know Ty the Bourbon Guy, who we discovered we're related. That's amazing. That's insane because of the podcast. We had Zoom podcasts when we had no idea what COVID was, when that was a brand new word. We had just incredible people. So I'm very pleased at what happened with this podcast and what it did. And I think it gave me a chance to develop this wild and national network. If you have a chance to go travel, even for a period of time, I highly recommend you do it. And frankly, a podcast is a great way to do it because it allowed me the chance to meet these folks and have a platform for it, along with just improving, I think, some skills within me to have more confidence in speaking and conversation and test my vocabulary on a regular basis, which it held up okay. So I'm grateful to everybody who listened and checked it out. Thank you for being a part of the podcast. I am not done doing stuff. So Wild Hixsons is where everything is going now. Andrea and I will have a regular podcast up there. She's an excellent co-host. I don't actually think she was on the Strangers Worth Meeting show because, she's the furthest thing from a stranger to me. So it just wouldn't have counted. But that's where we'll be doing everything. So I will keep you folks going. As always, my Instagram is @THixsonLife, and Andrea and I are @Wild Hixsons. So follow along, switch podcasts. We'll do a lot more over there. I mean, it's been a minute since I've even done an episode here. But this is the final episode. So thank you, everybody, for being a part of it. Holler anytime. Thank you to all my guests. I mean, they are what really made the show. I don't think anybody would have listened if it was just me talking on the road. So thank you very much to all my guests. My usual sign-off doesn't apply. How about we'll see you over on the Wild Hixsons podcast.